Hey guys, tonight we journey far out onto the wind-washed Mongolian steppe, where the air tastes faintly of dry grass and horse sweat, and the land stretches in every direction like a soft green sea. You're wrapped in a woolen deal that smells like smoke and rain. Beneath you, the earth feels springy, as though it remembers every hoof that ever touched it. The wind tugs gently at your sleeves, carrying the far-off clatter of hooves and the bark of a distant dog. It's 12:43, or maybe it's yesterday, and you're here to do something deceptively simple: tie up your horse. Only you might already be doing it wrong. You wouldn't think it matters much where you stop, how you dismount, or which way your horse faces. But on this plane, these choices whisper things about you: your rank, your family, your intentions. Park your horse too near the wrong tent, and someone might challenge you to a wrestling match. Hitch it on sacred ground, and you might not wake up with eyebrows tomorrow. You're smiling, but I'm serious. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your city and local time in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've been riding for hours, your legs numb, and your mind slowly unwinding from the rhythm of the gallop. Now the herd is slowing. Riders peel off breaking formation with a casual grace that only comes from lifelong practice. The camp is rising ahead like mushrooms after a storm, white domes of felt yurt roofs catching the last golden light. Fires are already flickering to life. It's time to stop. You glance around. No one's shouted orders. No flags have been raised. But everyone somehow knows exactly where to go. A child no older than 8 hops down from a dun pony and leads it in a wide arc around a cluster of yurts, tying it to a worn wooden stake that you didn't even see. Another rider throws you a look. You take the hint and dismount, boots thudding softly onto grass flattened by generations. The moment your foot hits the ground, the air changes. There's no real sound to it, more like a feeling, a pressure. You're being watched, not in a spooky way, more like you're the new guy trying to parallel park on a one-lane road during a family reunion. Every stake, every patch of trampled earth, even the wind's direction, everything tells you something if you can read it. You, so far, cannot. But you will, because the grass remembers. Here's a fun detail: Mongols believe that the land itself, the living grass of the steppe, absorbed memory. A well-trodden circle wasn't just dirt, it was a record. Horses that parked there 20 years ago, riders long buried in sky graves, still left their impressions physically and spiritually. When you park a horse, you're stepping into a silent conversation that's been going on for centuries. So you hesitate. That patch over there looks too clean, untouched. The kind of place only the bold or the ignorant would dare stake a mount. You shuffle slightly sideways. Historians still argue whether the Mongols had assigned parking or whether the layout of camps was governed more by oral tradition and vibes. But one thing they agree on: nothing about it was random. You choose a spot that looks moderately trampled, but not sacred. It's near enough to the other warriors that you won't seem standoffish, but not so close that you risk being accused of eavesdropping, or worse, trying to steal fermented mare's milk. You drive your stake into the ground, a carved, bone-capped thing someone handed you at your last stop. It thuds home with a satisfying crunch. Your mare flicks her tail and rolls one huge eye at you, but accepts the hitch. You let the rope go slack and step back. Then you remember the wind. Your horse's head is pointed north. Everyone else is east. You turn her, gently adjusting the rope, trying not to look like you're correcting a major social faux pas, which you absolutely are. A toothless old man with the gait of someone who's fallen off a horse more times than he's walked passes by. He pauses, spits, nods. You've passed your first test. Little by little, the logic starts to emerge. Look left, warriors' horses, fast, lean, high-strung. Look right, family ponies, shorter, calmer, often still saddled with gear. Beyond them, in the shadows of a low hill, you glimpse a row of mares with swollen bellies. Broodstock. Behind them, beyond even the reach of campfire smoke, a thin line of rougher posts. Tethered further still, you think you see 2 riderless mounts, their backs dusted with colored powder. You decide not to ask. Joke 1 in a Mongol camp. Even your horse has a social life. Don't ruin it. Someone hands you a bowl of Arag fermented mare's milk. You sip, trying not to grimace. The camp is settling now, fires crackling, voices low. You hear a whistle, 3 short notes, and a dozen horses raise their heads. That's the night watchman's signal. You've been here an hour, and already you feel like part of a symphony you barely understand. A woman walks past carrying a bundle of dry dung chips for the fire. She nods at your steak. Wrong kind, she says in a sing-song. That's for racing ponies. She's gone before you can ask what that means. You consider moving the horse, but she's already asleep standing up. You squat by your saddle, filling with the girth strap. Something glints in the grass, an old hoof-picked bronze with a bit of wear. Someone dropped it years ago. You pocket it, unsure whether that's a blessing or a mistake. The stars are out now. So many it's hard to find the dark between them. The camp breathes around you, snores from yurts, the crack of firewood. A horse chewing thoughtfully just to your left. You lie back. Grass tickles your ears. Your mare shifts, stamping once a soft thump that feels almost affectionate. There's one more thing you need to know before you drift off. In Mongol belief, the horse isn't just transport. It's memory. It's your name. In battle, a man without a horse might as well be invisible. In camp, a horse parked wrongly makes you louder than shouting. In death, well, let's just say some ghosts still ride. Joke 2. The fastest way to get haunted on the steppe is to tie your horse where a ghost already parked theirs. Tomorrow you'll learn how to properly mark your stake for ownership. You'll learn what to do if someone ties too close. And if you're lucky, how to pick a spot where your horse might sleep deeply and dream of outrunning the wind. Tonight, though, you settle in. The grass sighs beneath you. Your mare snorts once shifts and then goes still. Your breath slows to match hers, and the steppe, vast and velvet dark, folds its arms around you. You wake to the sound of hooves, not thundering, not panicked, but rhythmic calm, like rain tapping on stretched leather. The camp is stirring. Someone's already started a fire and the air smells like goat fat and ash. You sit up slowly, brushing bits of dried grass from your sleeves. Your mare is still there, thank the eternal blue sky, blinking sleepily and shifting her weight from one hoof to the other. Around you, the orchestration of morning has begun. A young boy squats beside a low pot, stirring something that bubbles and hisses like a potion. 2 warriors share a private joke near the water buckets. The yurts, which looked like simple tents last night, now pulse with life flaps open, felt, pulled back to reveal smoke curling from iron chimneys. Mongol camps wake up slowly, but with purpose, and today your lesson continues. You're going to learn what not to do when parking your horse. First mistake, touching someone else's stake. You're adjusting your own rope, just straightening it a little when you notice a mare nearby has tangled hers around a second stake. The line's tight, the poor thing shifting nervously, clearly uncomfortable. Out of instinct, you reach for the post. Don't. A hand grabs your wrist before you make contact. It's the same toothless elder from last night. He grunts and points to the stake, then gestures sharply no. You nod, murmuring an apology, heart thudding like a drum at a royal inspection. Mainstream fact in Mongol culture, a tethering stake is considered personal property and sacred space. To touch it without permission is to violate boundaries more intimate than a tent flap. If horses are memory, the stake is the anchor to identity, and nobody likes someone poking around their soul. Your fingers hover awkwardly in the air before you back away. The elder nods once and releases your wrist. He's trying to help. You're a guest after all, so you shift tactics. Instead of moving the stake, you untangle the rope gently at the mare's end. She exhales heavily, nudging your arm in gratitude. Somewhere behind you, someone chuckles, maybe you passed a test. Your mare watches with mild interest, occasionally flicking her ears at passing flies. You walk a slow circle around the parking area, eyes open now, finally seeing how much is encoded in the details. Not all stakes are equal. Some are plain, just smoothed branches jammed into the dirt. Others are carved with symbols. Circles, waves, small geometric patterns. Some are painted, though the pigments are fading in the sun. And a few have talismans tied near the top feathers braids of horsehair teeth from unknown animals. Fringe tidbit, some warriors believe that tying a sliver of bone from a fallen enemy to your horse's stake would grant speed and stamina, provided you never spoke the enemy's name aloud again. You stop beside a stake wrapped in red-dyed wool. The horse tethered to it looks older than most, with scars running across its flank. It stands perfectly still, not twitching, not stamping. A rider nearby sees you looking and raises his cup in a silent toast. You return the nod and keep moving. Over by the eastern side of camp, a cluster of younger riders is gathered around a new arrival. His horse is fresh damp from sweat, but gleaming, and his saddle is still dusted with travel grime. You approach slowly, trying to blend in. It doesn't work. They all glance up, and the new arrival smiles like he knows something you don't. He does. He pulls a small cloth from his belt and wipes the base of a stake before tying his reins. A casual move like brushing crumbs off a table. You squint, then you see it a mark. A tiny cut just above the soil line, barely visible unless you're looking for it. Debate alert historians still argue whether these marks were simple personal identifiers, or symbols linked to family totems, battle honors, or shamanic visions. Whatever the truth, they mattered. And they still do. You crouch beside your own stake and study it. Nothing, just smooth wood. You feel a little exposed, like you've shown up to a royal banquet wearing socks with holes in them. Joke one on the step, your parking spot has a resume. Yours is currently blank. Someone behind you clears their throat. It's the woman from yesterday, the one who warned you about the stake type. She tosses you a small stone, smooth and flat, with a hole through the center. Charm, she says. Hang it. Now you're not a ghost. You thank her. She walks off without another word. You loop the charm around your stake with a bit of cord, then stand and dust off your hands. Your mare watches the whole thing with bored eyes, chewing on a sprig of grass she's absolutely not supposed to eat. From across the clearing, a man whistles sharply. It's not a warning, just a call. His horse lifts its head immediately, ears forward. Then he clicks his tongue twice, and the horse untied walks straight to him, past stakes, past smoke, past piles of dung. It stops right in front of him, lowers its head, and lets him rest a hand on its mane. Your jaw might be slightly open. Another man notices. He trained it from birth, he says. Wakes up if he so much as sneezes. He shrugs. Most of us aren't that patient. You glance at your mare. She sneezes and snorts grass onto your boot. You sigh. So far today you've learned, don't touch someone else's stake. Every tether post tells a story. Horse parking etiquette includes personal marks and charms. There are levels to this game, and you are still in the tutorial. It's nearly midday now. Sun high. Shadows shrinking. Camp life has shifted from waking to action. Repairs are underway on a yurt wall. Two boys argue cheerfully over a dented cooking pot. And out near the outer ring, something new is happening. A line of stakes freshly driven into the ground, perfectly spaced, forming a neat semicircle. This isn't casual tethering. This is a meeting. The horses being led there wear ornamented tack saddlecloths, embroidered with gold thread reins wrapped in dyed leather. The riders walk beside them in formal dress, indigo, saffron, russet, and teal. You've learned enough not to interrupt. Instead, you hang back watching as each person ties their horse in exactly the same way, one loop, two turns knot left hanging loose. Then each rider brushes their hands across their horse's neck and steps away. Ritual. Historians suggest this particular formation may have preceded major tribal councils or deliberations over raids. Others argue it was simply a way to identify elite horses and their riders, establishing hierarchy through choreography. Whatever the case, it's clear you're witnessing something important. A child runs up beside you barefoot and grinning. Want to see the best stake, she asks. You nod and she grabs your sleeve, pulling you through the maze of mounts. Eventually, you reach it. At first it looks like the others, just a post, but it's older, worn, smoothed by countless hands and reins. Tiny etchings spiral up its length, birds' arrows, sunbursts. The child taps it. My grandfather says Genghis Khan's horse was tied here, once she whispers. You glance around. No one contradicts her. The air feels heavier somehow. You step back slowly, leaving the stake undisturbed. Your mare is still where you left her, dozing tail, swishing lazily. You sit beside her, tracing your new charm with one finger. You think you understand something now. The horse is only part of the picture. The tether, the stake, the ground beneath it, all part of a greater web, a system of honor, memory, and trust. Joke 2, you thought you were learning how to park a horse. Turns out you're rewriting your spiritual credit score. Evening draws close. Fires spark to life again. The horses nicker and settle, and you watch as one rider walks the line of stakes, checking each knot, not to police, but to honor the ritual. Tomorrow you'll learn what happens when someone parks in the wrong spot on purpose. Spoiler, it's louder than you'd expect. For now you exhale, stretch your aching back, and run a hand down your mare's dusty flank. She leans into it. Good sign. Dawn comes soft again. The sun a warm yoke on the step's curved edge, and your mare's breath a fog in the crisp air. You stretch beneath a scratchy wool blanket, limbs stiff, brain slower. The fire near you's burned down to embers. Someone's stirring a pot again, same mysterious mush, same goat fat perfume. Welcome back. Your mare stands right where she should be, tethered neatly, eyes half-lidded, tail occasionally flicking. You're getting the hang of this, but don't get cocky. Today's lesson is less about the tether and more about the unspoken rules of proximity. In other words, how close is too close to someone else's horse? Short answer, closer than a stranger, farther than a brother. You take a stroll hands behind your back like some casual con in training and notice it right away. Horses are tied at respectful intervals 6 to 8 feet apart. No overlap of ropes. No flank rubbing incidents. No tangled limbs or cranky teeth. It's not just good manners, it's tactical peacekeeping. Mainstream fact, Mongol horses were trained to be semi-autonomous, used to wide-open grazing and war marches. They didn't like being boxed in or rubbed the wrong way. Literally. You approach a cluster of horses tied in a gentle arc, each with their own radius of serenity. A younger rider, barely more than a kid, is brushing his gelding's mane. You make the fatal mistake of stepping between them and the next horse. The gelding swings his rump ears back. You freeze. So does the kid. Then he whistles through his teeth and clicks once. The gelding relaxes like someone hit an off switch. He looks at you. You were in his wind, he says, simply brushing a bit of dung off his boot with a stick. His wind? He gestures vaguely at the horse's tail, then waves a hand. Horses don't like others in their fart path. He says this like it's a known scientific law. Then he goes back to brushing. You nod, trying not to smile too hard. The phrase fart path will now live rent-free in your brain. Quirky tidbit seasoned riders believe that certain horses would refuse to eat or rest properly if another animal encroached on their habitual downwind zone. Superstition? Probably. But are you going to risk it? Not after that side-eye from the gelding. So you recalibrate. You circle wide now. You think about airflow. You think about a horse's line of sight, its sense of space. You remember how Mongol archers needed to leap onto fresh mounts at full gallop. There's no room for clumsy entanglements when lives are on the line. Your mare flicks an ear at your return, then does the most Mongol thing imaginable. She turns her back to you and urinates with casual indifference. A statement, probably. You sit beside her and chew a dried plum, the kind that wrinkles your whole face. Your neighbors are packing up for a short ride, looping extra gear onto saddles and chatting in low tones. There's no rush, but everything's moving. Time out here stretches like taffy, long and slow, then suddenly sharp. One rider, grizzled with one eye and 2 earrings, calls out a name. His horse doesn't move. He calls again. Nothing. Finally, he walks over and gives the horse a gentle shove on the shoulder, muttering something that sounds like an insult involving sheep. The horse sighs and steps forward. Another rider claps and laughs. Maybe don't tie him next to your mother-in-law next time. More laughter. Even the grizzled rider cracks a half smile. That's your cue to look again at your own parking choice. Your mare is flanked by a sleep-prone roan and a skittish dun. Peaceful, now sure. But you start to notice the silent signs, how the dun keeps glancing sideways, nostrils of flaring at every shift of the wind. Historians still argue whether Mongol horse placement had symbolic value, whether you tethered your mount between allies kin, or battle companions for strategic cohesion. Others argue it was just based on mood and convenience. Either way, you quietly shift your stake 6 feet further from the dun. She immediately relaxes, blinking slowly and letting out a small huff. Joke 1, congratulations, you just diffused an international equine incident without even speaking the language. Mid-morning arrives like a slap of warmth. Sun higher camp, more awake. A group of women has begun mending harness straps, their hands flying like weavers at a loom. Children chase a stray goat with mismatched sandals. And in the middle of it all, an argument brews, not shouting, but heated. You shuffle closer. It's about a steak. Two men stand beside a weathered post, nothing fancy, just a standard tether. But the problem is, both claim to have parked there yesterday. One gestures furiously at a charm hanging from the top. Mine, he says. The other pulls something from his sash, a knotted bit of string, and waves it in the air like legal tender. Everyone nearby watches, but no one intervenes. Eventually, an elder woman walks up, pulls out a flask, and pours a bit of kumis on the steak's base. Both men stop immediately. She speaks 2 words you don't catch, then walks away. Debate over. The man with the charm reties his horse and moves it to a new stake. The other sighs, but stays. You ask a nearby rider what just happened. She invoked Ulzi, he says. The blessing, he nods. Neutralizes conflict, like saying this spot belongs to no one now. Fringe belief or social tool, either way it works. You wonder if modern parking lots could benefit from the same trick. Maybe a little fermented mare's milk on the asphalt would stop some of those holiday shopping squabbles. Later that afternoon, a group of scouts rides in their horses frosted with road dust. They tie their mounts in the northeast corner of camp, away from the others. You notice a difference in their knots, tighter, faster, more practical. These aren't ceremonial loops. These are my horse might have to leave in 5 seconds knots. You get it now. Every knot is a sentence. Some say I'm here for a while. Others, this horse bites. A few I trust no one. Your own knot says I watched someone else do it and hope for the best. But you're learning, you untie, retie. Slower this time. 2 loops slack, just so. You let the charm dangle a little lower. Then you step back and watch your mare blink at you like, wow. Took you long enough. She's earned a snack. You pull a chunk of salt from your pouch and let her lick your palm. Her breath is hot, her tongue raspy. You lean your back against the stake and close your eyes. Around you, the camp breathes. The stakes form a quiet geometry across the grass, an invisible script of respect, trust, and memory. The wind shifts. You smell pine in the distance. Maybe a river. Joke 2, you came here to learn horse parking and accidentally enrolled in Equine Sociology 101. Before nightfall, a rider approaches you. He gestures toward your stake, nods once, and tosses you something. It's a small carved bead bone or ivory smooth and worn. For luck, he says. You don't ask why. You just thread it next to your charm and sit quietly while the stars begin to flicker awake. In night air on the steppe feels like a long exhale from the earth itself, cool, wide, and whispering. Somewhere a dog barks twice, then thinks better of it. You lie in your blanket with the bead still warm in your palm, thumb, smoothing its ridges like it might answer a question you haven't formed yet. Your mare shifts softly nearby, tethered at a polite peacekeeping distance. No one's in her wind. You don't fall asleep so much as coast into it, and when you wake, there's dew on your boots. Today you learn the secret geometry of the entry route. That's right, not just where to park a Mongol horse, but how to approach that parking spot without invoking divine ridicule or being labeled a city rider, a serious insult. You saddle up slow, your mare's ears flicking at every chirp. Riders are already out, galloping short loops in the distance, some drilling, some just stretching legs. You're waved over by a middle-aged man in a dusty teal deal with creases that suggest he's folded time. He gestures to follow, so you do. You ride together in silence for a while, hooves thudding soft against the damp soil. Then, without preamble, he asks, do you circle in or cut straight across? You pause. For what? The line of the stakes, he says, eyes still forward. You ride into park. Do you circle in or cut through others? You admit you just go in. He chuckles, the kind of sound you make when someone puts soup in a teacup. Watch, he says. You come up over a rise and see a small group dismounting near the eastern ridge. Every rider loops around the stake line in a wide-arcing approach, then enters from the rear right. Not a single one cuts through the lines or walks their horse between another's tether. Mainstream fact Mongol camps, even temporary ones, were often arranged with extreme attention to flow and hierarchy. Lines of horses' yurts fires, even dung piles followed invisible maps of purpose and respect. Nothing was arbitrary, not even how you arrived. He points at one younger rider who makes the mistake of trotting across a middle line. 3 heads turn, not hostile, just long. The kid gets the message, slows to a walk, and apologetically circles back the proper way. Your guide smiles. "We ride with care," he says. The path in says much about the man. Historians still argue whether this elaborate equine choreography was ritualistic or simply practical. The truth is, it's both. If you've ever tried threading a 20-horse line without starting a stampede, you'll understand that aesthetics and safety often walk hand in hand. Quirky tidbit: some clans believed cutting through a park line without greeting the horses first brought 7 nights of bad dreams. Others say it just got your saddle peed on. Either way, lesson learned. You and your guide ride a slow circle back to camp, your approach now, a sweeping arc from the rear. Your mare tosses her head, perhaps surprised by your sudden etiquette upgrade. She parks clean. You dismount, and just like that, you're invisible again. Now that you've cracked the approach, let's talk staggering. And no, not the kind you do after one too many cups of fermented mare's milk. Horse staggering. You look across the camp's stake field and see it clearly now. Horses aren't tethered in tidy rows like soldiers. They're offset staggered just enough that no 2 horses are directly face to face or tail to tail. Why? Because Mongol horses like to see their world. Eye contact matters, but not too much. Direct facing feels like a challenge. Rear end alignment, even worse. You try sleeping with someone's tail aimed at your face. The stagger creates a mosaic of comfort. Enough visibility for a horse to sense safety. Enough space to avoid drama. Joke 1, it's like medieval feng shui, but for horses with attitude. You pace between rows now, watching how each tether creates a unique bubble. Some horses prefer to sway in place. Others rotate in slow circles. A few seem to be engaged in existential staring contests with dung piles. One elderly man, white beard, saffron hat, motions you over. He points at the line of horses, says, "You see how they all tilt the same way?" You squint. It's true. Most heads are pointed ever so slightly east. He nods. Wind comes from west. Smell flows that way. They like it. Then he grins. Also, they know the sun rises where breakfast does. You're not sure how scientifically accurate that is, but you accept it as deep wisdom. Later that day, you witness a small ceremony. Not grand, no drums or chants. Just a girl no older than 12, leading her pony to the same stake her family has used all week. She sprinkles a pinch of herbs wormwood at the base, then bows one's palm to her chest. You ask what that was. Respect, someone says. Respect for the stake. Yes comes the reply, and the land. And the horse, and the morning. Fringe belief, maybe. Or maybe you're just starting to realize how many layers Mongol horse culture has. You sit under your mare's shadow and watch the line ripple with breath and muscle. A bird overhead cries once. Silence swells again. There's a rhythm to this place, a soft choreography, unspoken, but exact. You're learning to move with it. Evening comes with a ribbon of purple cloud along the horizon. Riders return their horses, dusty, sweat-streaked yet still alert. You help untie a skittish chestnut, letting him nuzzle your shoulder before leading him to water. Your mare watches ears forward, probably judging your form. You pass a test you didn't know was happening. Joke 2. You used to parallel park like a suburban disaster. Now you can align 2 stallions on a windy hill with nothing but a nod and a prayer. You clean your stake before nightfall. Just a simple gesture, brush the dirt, smooth the rope. Tuck your charm into its knot. A boy passes and nods approval. A silent promotion. You tie the mare one last time, her breath steady, her body quiet. Then you lie back again, that little carved bead still in your hand, thinking about wine patterns and line staggering and how entry says everything. Above stars spark to life. Beside you, the soft rustle of tether ropes tells the story of a camp settling into trust. By now you're no longer just another wandering rider playing at Mongol cosplay. You've earned your stake, literally, And tonight, as the breeze ghosts over the steppe, pulling soft cords from the ropes and tails and tall grass, you feel it. The shift. You're part of the hum now, not just watching it. Your mare breathes slow beside you, hooves scuffing faintly as she adjusts her stance. And as the first notes of pre-dawn arrive, a low pinkish smear behind the hills, you're already up brushing down her flank with a scrap of wool, greeting the morning like someone who actually knows what they're doing. But let's not get cocky, because today you enter the absurdly specific and unspoken realm of tethering knots. Yes, not just where you tie your horse or how you stagger them, but how exactly you fasten the rope to the stake. And spoiler Mongols notice. You learn this the hard way when an old herder with a voice like sandpaper squints at your knot, sighs loudly and says, "Your horse tied herself." Oof. So you sit and you listen. Mainstream historical fact. The Mongols used a variety of hitches and knots, many optimized for speed adaptability and low material waste. They weren't decorative, no elaborate sailor's braid. These were knots born of movement. Knots that held through windstorms and temper tantrums, yet could be loosed one-handed in a sprint. The go-to a double-loop slip knot, twisted counter to the wind's usual direction. That detail matters, because if the wind picks up the rope, tightens toward the post, not away. Flip that, and your horse could walk off mid-blizzard with your only bowl still tied to the saddle. You try it yourself. Loop once, twist, tuck, yank. The rope holds. It also resembles a deflated snail. Joke 1, you've invented the first Mongol knot that insults both the horse and the wind. The younger rider takes pity, sits beside you, and reties it in 3 fluid movements. You watch like you're observing surgery. It's not fancy, but it is deliberate. Tension angle, bite, all matter. Too loose she wanders, he says. Too tight she rebels. And just like that, your mare has an opinion about rope dynamics. There's something humbling in watching how even mundane gestures, tying, brushing, untying, become rituals of connection. Mongol horsemanship isn't about domination. It's about reading signals, building agreements, and that starts with a knot. Quirky tidbit, some riders added a charm, a bead, a tooth, a feather knotted into the tether rope for protection, not for the horse, for the tether. If the rope held through storms, they said the rider would come home from battle. You squint at your knot, not quite worthy of divine endorsement yet. Later that day, you are invited to the tethering drill. Yes, that's a thing. Riders form a loose half circle around a central post. One by one, they gallop in, dismount in motion, lead the horse in a sweeping curve, and tie off in under 6 seconds. It's part tradition, part flex. Think of it as a Mongol NASCAR pit crew meets equestrian ballet. Your turn comes, heart thumping. You ride in, dismount clean. Loop twist, dang it. The knot jams. You mutter something impolite under your breath and try again. The mare flicks her ears like she's grading your performance. Finally, the knot holds. Not perfect, but serviceable. The crowd claps once in unison. Not sarcastic, just measured. You've passed the "won't embarrass us" in front of a foreign dignitary threshold. That night, sitting near the fire with a chunk of dried curd in your hand and saddle soap under your nails, you overhear a group discussing tether ghosting. You lean in. Apparently there's a superstition about never tying a horse to a widowed stake, one that's been used in a past battle where the rider didn't return. These stakes, they say, carry the memory of loss. Horses tied there tend to spug shy or fall ill. Some riders mark such stakes with a knot of black string. Others just know by instinct. Historians still argue whether this practice had any basis in actual observation, or was simply grief ritualized into habit. Either way, riders respect it. Next morning, you double-check your stake. No black string. Just your beads, sun-warmed and familiar. You spend the day riding with one of the older herders. He shows you how the rope's thickness matters depending on season, thicker in winter, to avoid freeze-stiffening, thinner in summer, so it flexes better under heat swell. He even lets you try hand-braiding your own line. You produce something that looks like a breadstick in morning. Joke 2, Mongol horses could probably tie better knots with their teeth. That evening you practice again. Loop, twist, tug, pause. You test it from a trot. Dismount, tie, walk away. It holds. And for the first time, your mare doesn't immediately yank to test your handiwork. She snorts gently, then lowers her head to graze like she approves. You sit beside her as the stars return your hand, brushing the rope in quiet satisfaction. It's not flashy, but it's real. Just like everything out here. By now, you've graduated from fumbling knots and backhanded compliments to something much more delicate and infinitely more dangerous: parking your horse in the wrong clan space. It starts innocently enough. The camp's grown. Riders come and go. You've been here a while, long enough to recognize faces and the way certain horses nudge or bite each other like old married couples. One afternoon, you return from a scouting trip and find all your usual spots full, so you improvise. You drive your stake into a tidy patch of grass, tie your mare in her now respectable knot, and settle in. She grazes peacefully. You sip from your water skin. The world is quiet. And then you hear it. The unmistakable sound of someone clapping slowly. You turn. A wiry man with a hawk's nose and a coat the color of old blood is watching you, arms crossed, head tilted, like he's just spotted a toddler joyriding in his ox cart. You parked, he says, in Otkenbayer's shadow, which apparently is a very big deal. Mainstream historical fact: Mongol encampments weren't chaotic heaps of tents and livestock. They followed an invisible, yet highly respected spatial code, something closer to a mobile neighborhood grid than a random sprawl. Clans had designated zones. Seniority, loyalty, and bloodline dictated where your yurt, and by extension, your horses, should sit in relation to others. You friend have just parked on the border between two feuding cousin lineages, the steppe equivalent of parallel parking across a mafia turf line. The man sighs and gestures with two fingers. You untie your mare and move, farther than necessary, into the newbie fringe where the grass is short and the dung piles are suspiciously fresh. From here, you start to observe the logic more closely. Each clan's territory is loose but legible. Horses are parked in crescent patterns near their owners' gers, facing outward like petals around a central fire. The elder clans sit closer to the Khan's tent. Minor ones orbit the perimeter. Temporary guests like you stick to the outermost edge, a liminal zone between welcome and who invited you. Quirky tidbit: the wealthiest families often park their favorite horses under silk-draped sunshades, complete with dangling talismans to ward off envy. Not for the horses, those guys couldn't care less, but for the humans. Horse envy, it turns out, is deeply Mongol. You learn this the hard way again the next day, when your mare trots too close to a prize white stallion with a braid more intricate than your dreams. Its owner lets out a sound somewhere between a prayer and a curse. "Back her up," he hisses. That's a Kuro line. You nod like you understand, and back away hastily. Later, someone explains the Kuro clan is legendary for producing war horses so brave they allegedly once trotted toward a thunderstorm. People still breed for that particular snort. Historians still argue whether these bloodline myths shaped actual breeding patterns or just offered after-the-fact justification for high prices and inflated egos. Either way, your mare seems unimpressed. She rolls in the dirt beside a goat and snores. Over the following days, you begin to learn the nuanced art of reading space before staking. You look for dung clusters. Fresh piles usually mean recent claim. Ash patches suggest long-term occupants. Broken grass rings show where horses stood in circles, meaning active tether zones. There are unspoken signals, too. A line of braided sticks might mark an elder's spot. Feathers tucked into the grass can suggest a spiritual boundary. Don't ask, just steer clear. One morning, you almost park in a neat vacant patch, until you notice a small skull buried at its edge. Joke one, either it's a warning or someone had a really bad day with a goat. You back away slowly. Eventually, you're invited sort of into a shared staking circle. It's run by a pair of widowed sisters and a boy who whistles to call his horses. You park on the far edge, careful not to let your mare's tail drift across anyone's line. They don't say much, but they nod once, and that's enough. From them, you learn the etiquette of horse greetings. Yes, this is a thing. When you lead your mare in, you're supposed to pause at the invisible line, let her sniff the air, maybe whinny a greeting. If another horse answers, you wait. Horses apparently remember past rivalries, shared salt, stolen mares, or who kicked who in a snowstorm. There's a social logic to it. Letting your horse greet others calms tension, signals your presence, and reduces the risk of late night rope fights. Skip the ritual, and you might wake up to a hoof-shaped hole in your tent. One evening, as the sun dips low and the steppe turns bronze, you watch the entire camp settle. Horses tied in slow circles, tents glowing with firelight, the sky broad and silent and endless. You feel oddly at home. And then, just as you close your eyes, someone shouts across the wind, "Who parked next to the goat pen?" You freeze. Turns out your new spot borders a goat enclosure run by a notoriously territorial herder. You apologize, untie your mare, and shift her again, this time to a low ridge beside a quiet woman who sharpens knives by moonlight. She doesn't speak, but she tosses you a fresh rope. It's dyed green and tied at one end with a charm shaped like a fish. "Means peace," she says simply. You nod and tie your mare down, this time, double-checking all boundaries, knots, and emotional implications. Joke 2, Mongol horse parking is 1 part geometry, 2 parts politics, and 5 parts don't get stabbed. Later that night, you overhear a story. They say that Genghis Khan once moved an entire clan 3 yurts west because one of their horses stared too long at his. True, hard to say, but the old riders swear by it. What's true, though, is this space is memory, and on the steppe, memory is everything. So when you finally drift to sleep under your wool blanket, your mare tethered precisely between 2 non-offensive tufts of grass, you dream of horses parked like stars, bright, deliberate, and always aware of who's watching. You wake to the sound of hooves, slow, deliberate, muffled by morning dew. And when you peek out from under your sheepskin blanket, your mare is already standing, ears up, eyes fixed, waiting. But she's not looking at you. She's watching the horizon, where a string of riders approaches in near silence, their silhouettes dark. Against the first light, their mounts moving as one. Not quite a parade, not quite a patrol, something in between. You're about to wave, or at least feign the nonchalant head nod you've been practicing, but an older woman nearby lifts a hand and quietly says, "Don't." Apparently, you're witnessing a morning horse blessing. Mainstream historical fact, Mongol clans practiced a variety of rituals to maintain harmony between their animals, their spirits, and the shifting moods of the land. Horses, more than mere tools, were sacred, essential. Every hoofbeat was considered a form of communion, and mornings were especially charged. This particular procession is what they call the sun loop, a ceremonial ride tracing the camp's perimeter at sunrise. It blesses the herds, affirms the circle of protection, and bonus gives the elders a chance to casually inspect everyone's tethering habits. You stay still. Your mare, sensing the gravity of the moment, flicks her tail once and returns to chewing like a professional. The riders pass. One lifts a carved wooden rod and swings it in a slow arc, tracing a circle in the air. The gesture is old, so old that even some of the younger Mongols shrug when asked what it means. Historians still argue whether these movements stem from shamanic rites, celestial tracking, or the human tendency to turn everything important into a ritual dance. Either way, it's beautiful. You watch the dust settle, then untie your mare with care. Today you're joining a different kind of lesson: rotational parking on campaign. Yes, you heard right. Parking horses during long-distance marches isn't just stop and stake. It's a mobile ballet involving timing, formation, memory, and something your instructor calls wind shadow awareness. You nod like that means something. The troop halts near a cluster of rocks shaped like crumpled hats. It's break time, but not rest time. Everyone swings into motion. Veterans pick the highest ground for commanding horses, those trained to respond first. Scouts pick low scrub where scent carries best. The newer riders and you are sent to the tail edge where mistakes do the least harm. You begin to drive your stake when a wiry teen grabs your arm. "Not yet," he says. "Sun's still too high." Turns out, campaign etiquette says you don't park horses with backs to the sun during the hottest part of the day. Why their shadows fall across the rope and can confuse a grazing line, causing tangles or worse, a sudden bolt. Quirky tidbit: some older herders swore that shadows themselves could trip horses into ghost leg, a temporary lameness they blamed on bad tethering karma. You try not to offend the shadow gods. You wait until the sun dips, then retether at an angle that aligns with the lead scout's mount. That's the rule: always mirror the scout. It keeps the lines readable from a distance. As you drive your stake into the gravel-strewn earth, your fingers blister slightly. But the sound, the thunk of wood into soil is satisfying, solid, real. You loop the rope, test the knot, and take a breath. Then you notice something new. Every stake around you has a slight tilt. Not random, deliberate, leaning slightly west like they're bowing. You ask a grizzled rider with a beard like wet straw. Alignment, he grunts. So the line runs clean when they pull. And so the stake doesn't walk. Stake walking, that's a new fear. Apparently, a poorly planted stake can slowly walk out of the ground as the horse shifts, winding the line tighter until pop, you've got a free-roaming disaster. Joke 1 Mongol horses are escape artists with better instincts than most people you know. You test your own stake's tilt. Feels firm, holds weight. Maybe you're learning. That night after the ride ends and the herd settles, you sit by the fire with the others. Someone's strumming a Morin Kur, the horsehead fiddle, and the sound winds through the dusk like smoke. Stories unfold. They tell of a legendary horse who refused to be tethered, always breaking lines, but never fleeing far. She'd wait just out of reach, testing every rope. One day, a young rider gave up and tied his line around his own waist. Slept like that. In the morning, she was still there, watching. From then on, she followed him freely. Historians still argue whether the tale's origins lie in an actual bond, or were metaphor for the trust between steppe and soul. Either way, you look at your mare. She's dozing, one back hoof cocktail twitching in her sleep. You wonder if you'd tie yourself to her like that. Not yet, but maybe someday. Later, you're shown a rare technique, earth ring parking. Used during storms, it involves digging a shallow pit, lining it with hot coals, and staking inside it. Keeps the rope from freezing and anchors the stake deeper. It's also a good way to cook your own fingers if you're not careful. You try it once. Your fingertips still smell like singed wool 2 days later. Joke 2, nothing humbles you like burning yourself for a horse that doesn't say thank you. You begin to carry your stake like a badge, now looped with 2 ropes. One dyed red for speed tying, one plain for daily use. You even carve a small mark at the top, your symbol a crooked star. Looks like a bird fell, someone comments. Thanks, you reply. It's abstract. And so the days pass. You ride, you park, you repark. You learn when to wait, when to tie when to simply walk beside your mare and let her choose. Because sometimes the best place to park is where she tells you. The next morning the wind smells like copper and sage. A sure sign that today's lesson will involve storm tethering the dreaded wet weather module of Mongol horse management. Your mare already looks skeptical. Her ears flick, her eyes narrow. You both know it's coming. A thunderhead sits on the western horizon, flexing like a bicep made of wool. The old herders say, if the clouds look like galloping horses, it's best to stake yours twice. You're not sure if they mean that metaphorically or practically, so you do both. Storm etiquette is serious business. The Mongols rode through every season, but their camps didn't just weather storms, they adapted to them, with methods both poetic and bizarre. You start the day learning the double loop stake, which looks like a tangle at first, but unfolds like magic when pulled. It allows the horse to move just enough without getting entangled, like giving someone a long leash at a really stressful dinner party. One veteran spits into the dirt and says, if you don't tie right, the storm will untie for you. Mainstream historical fact. The Mongols used flexible decentralized formations that allowed for quick reparking during wind shifts, sometimes moving entire lines of horses mid-downpour to avoid panicked stampedes or ground softening beneath stakes. And yes, there's a term for that mud drift failure, and say it with dread. You learn quickly that wind direction isn't just about comfort, it affects everything. During lightning storms, horses must face away from the wind, so rain sheets over their flanks rather than hitting the eyes. A frightened horse can break rope with a sudden backward jolt, and once one panics, the rest follow. That's why riders space out shouters. You think it's a joke at first until someone hands you a horn carved from ibex bone and says, if the horses bolt, blow once loud and long, then lie down. Lie down. Storm won't chase you if you're lower than a shadow. He shrugs. Quirky tidbit in some clans. Certain warriors specialized in horse calming techniques that included singing lullabies directly into the ear of the lead stallion. The lullabies weren't particularly melodic, but the deep chesty hums mimicked herd sounds, comforting like the ambient noise of an animal podcast. You try humming to your mare. She sneezes and headbutts your shoulder. Fair enough. You recheck the knot, scoop a tiny drainage trench behind the stake, and drape a piece of hide between two rocks as a partial windbreak. It's not elegant, but it works. The clouds roll in mid-afternoon, fast and theatrical, and the sky flips from sun-washed gold to hammered pewter. Lightning forks above the ridge. Everyone goes quiet. This is the real test. Rain hits like cold needles, and you duck beneath your hide flap, watching your mare stand through it like a statue. She blinks. She breathes. She endures. Somewhere nearby, a horn sounds. Just once. Short, not a panic bolt, just a signal to reposition the outer ring. Horses' shift lines are slackened, then tightened again. The whole scene plays out like an orchestra tuning itself between movements. Historians still argue whether this level of coordination came from deep strategic planning or simply from generations of deeply horse-literate nomads doing what felt natural. You tend to think it's both. When the storm passes, it leaves the ground scrubbed clean. Hoof prints are sharp-edged in the mud, and the air smells of wet wool and trampled thyme. You walk the stake line checking for slack or drag. One horse you notice has twisted its line into a perfect figure eight around its own front legs. The rider shrugs. She does that when bored. You help untangle it and vow never to underestimate horses' capacity for chaos. After dinner, some surprisingly hearty goat stew eaten while standing in wet socks, you get a lecture on stakewood hierarchy. Not all steaks are equal. Turns out there's a whole taxonomy of preferred woods. Top tier tamarisk. Naturally rot-resistant, slightly flexible, and rumored to absorb the horse's energy, whatever that means. Second tier birch for its ease of carving and pleasant splinter pattern. Yes, that's a thing. Avoid at all costs poplar, which allegedly carries wandering spirit energy and will lead your horse in slow circles all night. Joke 1, imagine blaming your poor parking job on poplar ghosts. You'd fit right in. You run your fingers along your own stake made of juniper, which ranks somewhere in the fine if you have nothing else category. You decide to carve a groove ring to mark it a sort of amateur blessing. When you're done, the stake feels more like a tool and less like a stick. Progress. That night, while the others polish tack or hum by the fire, a wrinkled elder beckons you aside. She hands you something of flat stone with a hole drilled through its center worn smooth from generations of palms. Wind weight, she says, for your lines. The idea is simple: tie this stone midway on the rope, so if the wind tugs hard, the stone provides counter-tension without jarring the horse. It's clever. Ancient. You wonder how many innovations like this came not from books, but from simply living out here long enough to understand the wind. Joke 2, this is the kind of field-tested logic you wish airport seating had. You affix your wind weight and notice a change in your mare. She seems more at ease. Maybe it's your imagination, or maybe the stone's presence is a comfort signal. You make a mental note to pretend like it works either way. By now you've been parking horses in every possible condition. Snow sand, thunder, thirst. But today you learn something more subtle: how to read when a horse wants to move. It's not stomping, it's not neighing. It's a twitch of the tail, a flick of the nostril, a head tilt. Some riders say the horses dream of grass that only grows 3 hills away, that they know when the soil beneath them has soured, that they sense the movement of herds across valleys through vibrations in their hooves. You're not sure about all that, but when your mare shifts her weight, glances left, and exhales sharply, you listen. You lead her to a new spot, tighter ground, with clover patches, and she settles immediately. Lesson learned etiquette isn't just about rules. It's about listening. Joke 3 horses have opinions. Yours just happens to be passive-aggressive. That night you watch the stars emerge like lanterns from an invisible ceiling. The stake line glows faintly in the moonlight rows of horses breathing in unison. Some snore, some mumble. One occasionally sighs like it's just so over today's lesson. You lie back in the grass, hands behind your head, and exhale. The storm's past. Your knot's held. Your mare is fed, parked, and safe. and you blistered, soaked, humbled are starting to feel just a little like you belong. The morning begins with a hoof print stamped directly onto your sleeping mat. You stare at it groggy and mildly offended, while your mare blinks at you from 2 paces away, chewing contentedly. Judging by the trail in the dirt, she wandered over, looked at you, and very deliberately parked her front left hoof with the precision of a bureaucrat approving your lease. Lesson 1. Sometimes the horses come to park you. You brush yourself off and crawl out from under your blanket just in time to catch the day's first briefing today. It's rotational tethering, a practice that sounds like a military maneuver, but is really just the Mongol version of valet service. Here's the idea in a moving camp, especially one staying only a night or two. It's inefficient to drive stakes for every horse. Instead, you rotate horses in shifts. One group grazes freely, another is tethered to mobile picket lines, and a third is used for errands or scouting. Mainstream historical fact, Mongol armies often traveled with several remounts per rider, sometimes 5 or more per soldier, making rotational grazing and parking essential to avoid overgrazing and to maintain endurance across huge distances. You're assigned to the shift rider team, which means you'll be walking circles with the horses like a monk with a prayer wheel. You lead your mare and 2 others along a pre-marked grazing loop, each tethered loosely to a central pole you drag along like a makeshift maypole. They nibble and plod, nibble and plod. It's meditative until one horse suddenly stops and sneezes directly into your sleeve. You now carry the blessed mucus of the herd. Quirky tidbit: to prevent nighttime theft in rotational camps, some Mongol clans would tie small bells or even hollow seed pods to their horses' tails. If a horse moved too far or too suddenly, it jangled like an irritated tambourine. Your trainer today, a man with eyebrows like unraveled thread, tells you to trust the rhythm of the tether. It is a conversation, he says, placing your hand on the taut line. If it pulls back, you're talking too loudly, which oddly enough is better relationship advice than you've gotten from most dating books. You rotate the horses through their loop and learn how to count hoof falls to judge fatigue. Every 6th loop you pause, shift the lead horse, and move the stake. It's all about keeping pace without forcing it. The result is surprisingly soothing. Historians still argue whether the Mongols' rotational methods were born from ecological necessity or military genius. Probably both. After all, overgrazing your mounts in the middle of a conquest is a pretty poor logistical choice. By midday, you've rotated 9 horses and your arm feels like it's lost its will to live. You sit down on an upturned feed bucket painted with a crude sketch of a smiling goat for reasons no one explains and sip mare's milk straight from a bag made of another goat. You're starting to think goats are the duct tape of the steppes. A senior rider offers you a break and challenges you to a stake toss, which sounds like a fun game, until you realize it's a serious skill test. The goal: fling a tether stake in a straight arc, so it lands point down into soft ground. A good stake thrower can park a horse in under 10 seconds. You go first. Yours bounces like a lazy javelin and rolls under a dung pile. He nods solemnly, then throws his, and it sticks perfectly, the rope end dangling in triumph. Joke 1: if Olympic stake tossing ever becomes a thing, Mongol great-grandmothers would sweep gold. You get better after 5 tries. By your 6th, the stake lands with a convincing thud. The onlookers nod. You're half-trained, someone mutters, which you take as high praise. Later that day, you're taught how to read wine-drawn trails, trampled circles, hoof-drag lines, and pawing patterns that reveal everything from impatience to injury. Your instructor points to a half-moon hoof print and asks what it means. You guess moon worship. He squints. Close. But that horse's right hind is shorter than the left, probably limping. You lean closer. It still looks like a moon to you. Turns out hoof reading is half art, half superstition, and a third some kind of optical illusion. You follow your instructor from one end of the field to another, deciphering prints like a detective in a pasture. One line of hoof marks leads straight into a patch of thistles. This horse, he says, doesn't make good choices. Relatable. As the afternoon wanes, the topic shifts again, this time to emergency untying. Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. Sometimes a horse needs to be freed instantly, whether because of fire sudden attack or a snake doing something incredibly snake-like. That's when you use the quick pull loop, a knot designed to release with a single sharp tug. You practice the move over and over, tie, pull, tie, pull. Eventually, you get fast enough to earn a round of polite applause, 3 claps, and a grunt. You feel like you've won something, though you're not sure what. Joke 2. If this whole Mongol apprenticeship doesn't work out, you now qualify for a very niche escape room. By sunset, you return to your own mare, who's been rotated, parked, rotated again, and now seems mildly insulted that you left her with the trainees. She flicks her tail in your face as you walk up, but accepts a handful of grain with only minor sulking. You tie her for the night using your quick release loop, then sit beside her and watch the stars rise. It's strange how something as mundane as tethering a horse can become a kind of ritual, a quiet conversation between human animal and landscape. Every line tells a story, every knot a decision, every hoofprint a sentence in the diary of the day. And when you finally lie back on your mat, now wisely moved to a hoof-free zone, you find yourself counting rotations instead of sheep. 3 loops pause, shift the lead, loosen the line, and let your breathing match the pace of grazing horses in the starlight. Joke 3. If Mongol horse parking ever needed a lullaby, it would sound like rope dragging across dry grass and someone snoring softly into a saddle. You wake up to hooves thudding the earth in a rhythmic procession, not a stampede thankfully, but the quiet choreography of a morning waterline, yet another ritual in the vast lexicon of Mongol horse etiquette. Your mare is already in cue-tail, flicking with a kind of bureaucratic boredom, waiting her turn at the creek. You, however, are still blinking sleep from your eyes and trying to remember if that hoofprint in your dream was symbolic or real. Spoiler, it was real. Right on your thigh. Today you're being introduced to hydration hierarchy, the unspoken but very real order, in which horses approach water sources based on seniority, breed temperament, and even superstition. Mongols didn't just dump horses at the river and hope for the best. Every stream, pond, or trickling puddle had its own set of protocols. Mainstream historical fact: in large encampments, Mongol riders sometimes built temporary water routes, ditches or channels dug from creeks to guide water closer to the herds without churning up riverbanks. This also helped prevent diseases caused by water stagnation or contamination from overused watering holes. Your trainer, a wiry woman with a voice like gravel and a braid longer than your leg, explains how you match horse to water timing. Stallions first, mares next, foals last. Unless it's summer, then reverse it. Unless it's a festival day, then ask the stars. That last part may be a joke, or not. Horses who jump the line quite literally are called splashers, and they're frowned upon. Splashers create chaos. They muddy the bank, unsettle the foals, and worst of all, offend the horse in front of them, who may respond with a swift kick or a snort of disapproval more eloquent than most political speeches. You guide your mare with slow, measured steps, keeping one eye on the lead stallion up front, a gray beast with the attitude of a chess grandmaster. He drinks in silence, nods, and moves on. Your turn. Your mare drinks like she's trying to absorb the whole creek into her bones. You crouch beside her, letting the sound of water slurping and hooves shifting lull you into a rhythm. It's peaceful until the stallion, 2 horses down, decides to test the water with his back leg. Splash. Now everyone's wet annoyed and eyeing him like he's just burped at a royal banquet. Quirky tidbit: some Mongol riders believed that a horse who stirred water before drinking was forecasting rain. If 2 horses did it in a row, tents were reinforced and saddles moved undercover. Horses in this logic weren't just animals, they were meteorologists in disguise. You spend the rest of the morning on watering site rotation, which means scouting alternate creeks or springs, and noting soil stability, current speed, and mosquito volume measured in bites per minute. You discover that horses prefer cool moving water with low banks. You also discover that leeches are nature's way of keeping you humble. By midday, your boots are soaked, your map scrawled with notes, and your fingers smell vaguely of mint, some wild herb you crushed by accident. It's not unpleasant. Historians still argue whether Mongol water rituals were purely practical, or if they had embedded spiritual significance, especially considering how carefully riders avoided contaminating shared sources. Some oral traditions suggest water had guardian spirits, not gods exactly, but moody entities that punish the careless. Back in camp, you help prepare the portable water basins for the older horses, Shallow leather slings stretched over wooden hoops designed for horses too stiff or ornery to trek to the stream. Your job is to carry water from the creek using a double-skin sack that sloshes ominously with every step. Joke 1: nothing teaches balance faster than a leaking goatskin water balloon strapped to your back. One elder explains the philosophy behind these portable basins. It's not pampering, it's respect. The old ones carried us. We carry for them now. You nod suddenly, very aware of your own spine's complaints. Later that afternoon, you're introduced to the concept of ritual mud, washing an occasional practice where horses were allowed, and even encouraged to roll in shallow mud after watering. Not just to cool down, but to ease itches, deter parasites, and according to at least one herder, because sometimes they just like being gross. Mud etiquette is loose, but not lawless. You watch as 3 mares roll in perfect synchrony, then pop back up like loamy jack-in-the-boxes. Your mare stares at them, unsure. You give her a nudge. She shrugs metaphorically and joins in. Now she's muddy damp and considerably more pleased with herself. The day ends with evening rehydration, a shorter procession back to the water, this time with less ceremony, but equal attentiveness. You walk your mare along a different route, this one bordered by tall reeds that sing softly in the wind. The sun is low, painting the horses gold. Somewhere behind you, someone begins to hum. You catch snippets of the tune. It sounds like a lullaby, or maybe a drinking song slowed to bedtime tempo. You hum along. The water glows in twilight. Your mare drinks again, this time more delicately, as if aware the day is winding down. You stroke her neck. She leans into it. You both exhale. Joke 2: you used to think parking a car in a tight garage was stressful. Try organizing 50 thirsty horses in alphabetical order by temperament. As the stars emerge and the firelight in camp flickers, the trainer calls for one last lesson, recognizing overhydration. Apparently, yes, horses can drink too much, especially if water follows a long dry ride. Symptoms include excessive yawning, limp ears, and what one herder calls the grass bubble, a frothy drool halo that looks ridiculous and smells worse. You spend a good hour watching for these signs, and sure enough, one pony starts yawning like it's auditioning for a soap opera. You guide it away, pat its side, and laugh quietly. Joke 3: this pony drinks like it's trying to forget a bad breakup. You return to your tent, muddy, sun-drenched, and just a little wiser about liquid logistics. Who knew water could come with so many unspoken laws? Your mare curls into sleep beside the feed bucket. You follow suit, staring up through the thin tent flap at the sky. A comet streaks past. Maybe. And the creek sings in your ears, slow and steady, like a lullaby written in hoofbeats and ripples. Morning smells like horse breath, damp grass, and an odd hint of garlic, possibly from someone's leftover dumplings, possibly from the mare sleeping with her nose in your boot. You groan gently, trying not to wake her. She grunts anyway, shifts her weight, and proceeds to sneeze directly onto your leg. So begins your day with the saddle zone protocol, the part of horse parking etiquette that's more about what goes on the horse while parked than where it's tied. You crawl out of your tent and blink against the rising sun. Already horses are being tended to. Blankets are being flapped, bridles unhooked, and saddles inspected with a reverence usually reserved for sacred relics or first edition cookbooks. Your trainer's still chewing on something that suspiciously resembles last night's mutton, points to your mare. Saddle on the left side always, unless you're trying to insult her or us. That's not sarcasm. Mainstream historical fact: Mongol riders had a strong cultural bias toward the left side of the horse. Most mounting, saddling, and dismounting rituals were performed from this direction. Theories abound. Some suggest it stemmed from how quivers and bows were worn, others from ancient steppe superstitions about the body's sun side. You gather your tack, saddle first, then girth straps, then bridle, except you're told not to bridle her just yet. First comes the main check, a vital but often overlooked step in the daily Mongol grooming sequence. You part the mane with your fingers, looking for signs of tension, heat, or leftover burrs. She's clean, but you leave a braid anyway, one tiny loop, knotted loosely behind the ear. It's not for style. It's for saddle memory. Quirky tidbit: some Mongol riders believe that tying a horse's mane during rest helped it remember its training or mood from the previous day, like bookmarking a chapter in your sleep. Your trainer grunts approval. She was calm yesterday. Let's hope she stays that way. You lay out the saddle pad, a simple felt square, stitched with faded patterns, and ease the wooden saddle frame into place. These saddles aren't the soft Western ones, you know. No Mongol saddles are stiff, high-backed, and perfectly engineered to keep you in the seat during battles brawls or exceptionally dramatic prairie dog holes. The saddle placement ritual requires forechecks, even pressure along the spine symmetry of girth tail clearance, and the ever-critical wobble test. You press both sides of the saddle gently. No creaks, no squeaks. A firm wobble, all is well. You fasten the girth, 1 loop, 2 loops, a final tug. Then you wait, because Mongol etiquette dictates a short pause between saddling and riding. The horse needs to adjust. Imagine someone tying a mattress to your back, your trainer says. You'd want a second to breathe too. While your mare breathes, you brush her sides. She shivers once, then stills. Historians still argue whether these saddle rituals were driven by functional necessity or deeply ingrained animist beliefs. Some traditions held that the horse's body was a vessel of wind, and improper saddling disrupted its internal flow, causing missteps, tantrums, or worse, sudden refusals at creek crossings. Once she's settled, you begin today's task, managing the saddle rest zone, a fenced-off area where unsaddled gear is parked during grazing breaks. Yes, not just horses get their own parking rules, saddles do too. This space, marked by 3 upright sticks and a curve of braided rope, is sacred. No stepping over it. No sitting on saddles. No laying them upside down, unless you're in mourning. You're not in mourning today, though you might be if your mare rolls on your gear again. You place your saddle with care girth, tucked in stirrups tied, and the pad folded neatly beneath. Next to you, a younger rider plopses down with a grunt. The trainer glares. Would you toss your grandmother's cloak like that? The kid blushes, rearranges the saddle, muttered apologies. Joke 1. In Mongol culture, you don't just treat the horse like royalty. You treat its furniture like heirlooms. You're then led to the blessing circle, a ring of stones used during festival rides or long journeys. Riders step inside one at a time, leading their horses in a clockwise arc, while humming low, wordless tunes. It's said to align horse and rider energy. You and your mare shuffle awkwardly, hum something that might be the tune from a noodle commercial, and exit the circle unscathed. Back at camp, saddles are now inspected. Your trainer runs a hand beneath the pad, checking for sweat patterns. No hot spot, she notes. Means the balance was good. She taps the pommel where you've tied a small charm, a bronze coin braided with horse hair. She raises an eyebrow. Yours? You nod. From the blacksmith's daughter. She said it keeps the saddle from slipping. She grins. Romantic and practical. Good. Joke 2. Nothing says, I like you, like a gift that prevents spinal injuries. Next comes the saddle swap test. You mount 3 different horses using your saddle to learn how weight gait and girth length affect fit. 1 horse bucks slightly. 1 walks like it's auditioning for a drama. 1 seems perfect until it belches mid-trot. You note the difference. Learn to listen to the creaks, to feel the shift in leather. Saddles like shoes mold to their wearer. But unlike shoes, a misfit saddle can launch you into a ditch. After dismounting, you unsaddle with ceremony. The girth is loosened in stages. The pad is peeled slowly. The saddle is hoisted with a grunt that feels almost reverent. Your mare sighs. You carry the saddle back to the rest zone, gently brushing off dust, checking for cracks, and yes, tapping the coin for luck. You lay it down with care. A whisper of felt, a thunk of wood. Evening falls with a sigh of wind across the steppe. The saddles sit in rows like silent sentinels. You rub your sore legs, lean back against your tent pole, and watch the stars appear in clusters. Joke 3. You now understand why horses are considered noble. They carry your weight and your mistakes, and they still let you saddle up again the next day. As you close your eyes, you think of the saddle's creak, the breath of your mare, and the hush of the evening. Another rule learned, another step forward. You wake to the sound of hooves. Not galloping, thankfully, just that gentle rhythmic clop of a half-dozen horses stretching their legs across dew-wet grass. The air smells like fire ash leather and the sweet tang of fermented mare's milk. Someone's already passing around the morning bowl, its contents lukewarm and suspiciously lumpy. You sip anyway. It's time for your next etiquette lesson: shared grazing zones, the Mongol version of valet parking, but with more kicking. You shuffle out toward the edge of camp, where dozens of horses graze freely in the pre-dawn quiet. The grass is patchy, the sky wide open, and your mare is already side-eyeing a flashy stallion nearby, who seems intent on twirling in place like he's auditioning for Swan Lake. Your trainer squints toward the horizon. Today we cover boundaries, she says. Horse ones. Rider ones. The unspoken kind. She's not joking. Mainstream historical fact: the Mongols, despite their fearsome rep as world conquerors, had intricate systems of unwritten rules governing shared spaces, especially when it came to grazing zones. The Kulan wild steppe horses were respected, but domesticated herds operated within invisible fences of habit scent and rider agreement. You could technically let your horse graze anywhere, but should you? Different question. You approach the first rule without realizing its spacing. Every horse is tied or loose with at least a 12-pace buffer. It's not just to prevent tangling, it's social courtesy. Horses, much like people, have opinions about elbow room. Your mare, for example, does not appreciate the flashy stallion's interpretive dance. Quirky tidbit: Mongol children were taught from an early age to read horse moods, the way others read facial expressions. Flared nostrils, Wadarsk nervous. Flicking tail, Wanarshkashk annoyed. Ears flat and head dipped. You're about to get kicked into next week. You find an open patch, pat your mare's flank, and begin the tie line ritual. The peg is wooden, carved from willow, and shaped like a question mark. You drive it into the earth with a rock, then loop your line with 3 twists, left over right, a signal that the horse is friendly. Right over left, that's a warning. The stallion nearby has a bright red strip of cloth knotted to his halter. Your trainer catches you looking. He bites. Slowly noted. You lay out your grazing line long enough for the movement short enough to prevent drama. Mongol etiquette teaches that if a horse steps over another's line 3 times in a row, the rider is at fault, not the horse. On the 3rd step, you're expected to intervene. Politely. Swiftly. You pull out a handful of bridle charms, small tokens tied to the tether line for luck, clarity, or sometimes just decoration. Today's charm is a carved wooden sheep, a joke from one of the camp kids. To remind you, he said, not to get lost with the wrong herd. Joke 1. You haven't been mistaken for a sheep yet, but the day is young. Now comes the guard rotation, a sort of babysitting patrol. Every rider takes a turn watching the grazing herd, ensuring no one strays too far or picks a fight. It's your turn today. You climb a small rise with a bow slung lazily across your back and a horn to blow if needed. You sit, you watch. You realize horse watching is 40% boredom, 30% paranoia, and 30% weird admiration for how a horse can poop and walk at the same time. Historians still argue whether shared grazing zones were more about survival efficiency or communal bonding. What's certain is that Mongol camps thrive because of this balanced individual freedom wrapped in mutual accountability. If your horse wandered into someone else's camp and caused damage, it wasn't just your embarrassment, it was your debt. Midway through your shift, the flashy stallion snaps his line and takes off across the zone tail, high ears, wild. Your mare follows him with her eyes unimpressed. The chase is short-lived. 3 riders corner him using the whip spiral method, a series of widening loops with soft cracks nudging the rogue horse back without touching him. You help reset the peg loop the line with a firm leftover right, and mutter something about drama queens. Back at your patch, your mare's tail is braided courtesy of one of the camp kids trying to earn praise. Braiding, while decorative, also helps prevent matting and tangling during long rests. You nod thanks and offer the kid your last dried plum. Joke 2, it's never too early to bribe future hoof cleaners. You sit cross-legged beside your mare, brush in hand, watching as dew evaporates from her shoulders. She smells like dust grass and warmth oddly soothing like a living campfire. The grazing zone hums with quiet energy, 100 hooves stepping carefully over a silent choreography of lines and boundaries. Someone blows the horn, time to rotate out. You tag in the next rider who carries a copper bell on her belt, a signal for the evening tether. You help pack up, gather lines, and whisper thanks to the ground for holding firm. The sun drops low, gilding the horizon. Riders begin to shift their horses into night configuration, a slightly tighter formation closer to tents, tied with shorter lines to minimize midnight wanderings. You loop your mare with care, laying a small flat stone at the peg's base, a signal to others that this spot is claimed until sunrise. Your mare noses your shoulder. You pat her neck, feeling the thick muscle beneath. She's your vehicle, your heater, your companion. Mongol riders didn't own their horses the way we think of ownership. It was a bond, a shared existence. You protect her feed, her rid her moods. She in turn carries you across the world. You give her a final brush whisper, something that might be a lullaby, and slip back toward your tent where the evening fire flickers and someone is tuning a 2-string Morin Kur, the horsehead fiddle. Joke 3, if your horse ends up in a song, that's love. If you end up in one, it's probably because you fell off. As the stars gather, you lie back on your bedding fingers, smelling faintly of grass and rope. The rules, the rituals, they're starting to make sense now. Mongol life isn't chaos on horseback. It's carefully choreographed movement, etiquette coated in knots, pegs, and the soft snort of a contented horse. Sleep finds you with the memory of hoofbeats, the scent of leather, and the gentle twitch of a tail against your leg. You're woken not by sound, but by silence, a thick anticipatory hush that blankets the morning like snow that hasn't yet fallen. The horses are still. Even the wind seems to be holding its breath. You sit up slowly, boots, half off hair, pointing in 7 directions, and that's when you notice every rider is preparing for something. Your trainer, already cinching her belt, tosses you a curious grin. Today's lesson, she says, is about ranking lines, where your horse parks when the stakes are high. Welcome to the ancient Mongol answer to valet hierarchy. Because yes, even in a culture where everyone smells faintly of saddle wax and fermented milk, horse parking had a pecking order, especially during assemblies battles and visits from very important khans. Mainstream historical fact. In formal settings, Mongol horse placement followed strict positional logic. Proximity to the command tent reflected rank, reputation, and trustworthiness, both the riders and the horses. You couldn't just roll in with a muddy stallion and park beside the general. That's the historical equivalent of leaving a dented scooter in front of Buckingham Palace. You're handed a bundle of colored ribbons. Markers says your trainer, for designation. Blue for elders, red for active warriors, green for healers and cooks. No one gets gold except for envoys. And today, rumor has it an envoy is coming. You scramble to your mare and begin the process of prestige, prep, an unspoken grooming arms race. Hooves are polished, manes are combed into wind-resistant swirls. Saddles are dusted so meticulously you could eat dumplings off them, not that you should. Mongol etiquette holds that food near saddles tempts bad luck and stomach worms. Possibly the same thing. You attach your green marker discreetly. Healer's apprentice. Not glamorous, but respected. The placement back left quadrant, 3rd row. Just behind the fire breather and 3 horses down from the shaman's leopard-spotted mare. You guide your horse to the marker zone. Joke 1. The horse next to yours is wearing beads of mirror and what looks like stolen tent fringe. Someone's overcompensating. As riders form their lines, the patterns become visible. Diamond formations near the command tent, starbursts for ceremonial zones, spirals for festivals. You watch the envoy's guards arrive first, tall silent riders with white blanketed horses that move like ghosts. Then the envoy himself, dressed in robes so long you're surprised he doesn't trip over them. His horse is smaller than expected, but the blanket is embroidered with the golden sunbursts, and his bridle gleams like a king's breakfast tray. He parks in the center square. Your mare flares her nostrils. You pat her neck. No showing off. We're not here to get adopted into royalty. Next comes the inspection round where senior riders walk through the lines, checking for proper spacing gear readiness and etiquette breaches. You straighten your belt. Your mare adjusts herself like she's rehearsed this in a mirror. The inspector pauses, looks at your saddle charm, raises an eyebrow. You hang this upside down on purpose. You glance. The sheep charm is upside down. You smile awkwardly. Sheep acrobatics, new style. He grunts, walks on. Your mare flicks her tail, probably an embarrassment. Historians still argue whether the ranking lines served primarily military functions or cultural cohesion. While practicality was obviously important, quick mounting, efficient formation, the rules also reflected values, humility, cooperation, readiness. Even where your horse stood said something about who you were. Now it's time for the council circle, a meeting where elders speak, envoys listen, and everyone else tries to look attentive while suppressing the urge to nap. Horses are tethered around the outside of the gathering in a massive crescent tails facing outward, heads inward. Why? So if spooked, they run away from the fire and not into it. Quirky tidbit, the word Jurgal in Old Steppe dialects refers not just to honor, but to placement of trust where your horse stood when the fire was lit. Some said if your mount ever circled the fire twice before stopping, it meant you were destined for greatness, or trouble, or both. Your mare circles once, pauses, then turns, circles again. You both pretend not to notice. The council begins. Elders speak slowly with gaps so wide between sentences you could ride to the next hill and back before they finish. You listen to words like territory heralds, seasonal grazing rights, but your mind wanders to your horse, chewing a strip of grass and staring at the envoy's white mare with a mix of admiration and hunger. You glance at the other horses, noticing subtle markers. Some wear bells gifts from brides. Others have tassels woven from wolf fur tokens of protection. A few bear scars visible under thin patches of hair from battles or long journeys. These aren't just animals. They're biographies in motion. Joke 2, you realize your mare's life might be more interesting than yours. She's certainly traveled more. As the council ends, riders begin the disbanding ritual, a choreographed unparking ballet where horses exit in reverse rank order. The lowest ranked go first, peeling off in arcs that minimize dust clouds. No one wants to choke the con. You guide your mare with care, letting her hooves trace practice patterns. Your exit path leads you past the center again, where the envoy has already dismounted and now sips something from a copper bowl while his horse stands like a statue. Your mare snorts head high. You'll get your own copper bowl when you earn it, you murmur. Once outside the circle, horses are led to the cool-down lines where they're allowed to graze, briefly breathe, and adjust. You pat your mare's flank, loosen her girth slightly, and rub a soft cloth along her sweat line. She huffs content. You settle on the grass, watching riders wander back to camp, saddlebags slung, low bows unstrung. The envoy leaves last his party, disappearing into the haze like a mirage retreating. You and your mare lie back to back in the dusk. She chews slowly. You do too, some kind of dumpling wrapped in a mystery leaf. Not bad. Joke 3. If your mare ever runs for office, you'll be her campaign manager, assuming she doesn't forget you when she's famous. The stars blink into existence. You hum an old lullaby you half remember from childhood, something about rivers and hoofbeats, maybe about wind. You fall asleep thinking about fire circles, pecking orders, and the strange, beautiful logic of a world where even parking spots are earned, not assigned. By the time the camp stirs again, your mare's already up, shaking dust from her coat, and eyeing the morning with mild suspicion. You're slower. Your joints ache from sleeping too long in a curled shape, your neck stiff from using a rolled-up saddle blanket as a pillow. But today the ache is welcome because this morning's lesson isn't about fancy ranks or ceremonial dances. No, today is about the messy, muddy, very real logistics of Mongol horse parking during sudden travel halts. In short, what to do when everything goes sideways. Mainstream historical fact. The Mongols could break down and relocate an entire camp in under an hour. That included packing tents, gathering livestock, feeding children, and you guessed it, securing horses in a temporary controlled fashion. The challenge, you often had to park your horse while still moving. This is emergency etiquette, and it matters. Because the difference between a well-tethered horse and one that bolts during an ambush could mean the difference between escape and doom, which frankly seems worth a training session. So you're bundled onto your mare after half a dumpling and a gulp of air that passes for breakfast, and off you go riding at a controlled trot through narrow river valleys where frost still clings to shaded stones. Your trainer barks instructions: rapid descent, rocky ground ahead, simulate, surprise, halt. You mimic her leaning back as your mare slows to a crunching stop. Dust swirls. A horn sounds 3 sharp blasts to signal that the caravan must halt and form a circle cluster, the emergency pattern for protecting people, wagons, and horses. This is where you learn the difference between static pegs and live loops. Static pegs are what you've been using, hammered stakes that stay put. But in this scenario, the ground is too rocky, too unstable, and you don't have time. Instead, Mongols relied on looped reins, wrapping the lead around low brush wheel hubs, or if desperate, their own arms. You jump off and use a dried tree root to loop your mare's reins. She shifts uncomfortable, but waits. She's trained for this. You less so. Quirky tidbit. Some elite horses were taught a command that meant stay still and pretend you're tied useful during raids where stealth mattered. A whispered syllable and the horse would freeze, no peg required. Your mare does not know that command. Joke 1. You try whispering the syllable anyway. She yawns in your face. The circle cluster tightens. Riders work fast, looping, blocking, calming panicked horses that don't understand why breakfast has turned into a defensive maneuver. You help tie off 2 extra mounts to the rear axle of a supply cart. One of them promptly bites your shoulder. Gently, but with emphasis. Historians still argue whether Mongol emergency parking was purely instinct or trained behavior. Some believe herders developed reflexes from early childhood. Others argue specific drills were taught with whistle calls for different parking methods. You're leaning toward both. The next exercise, hobbling on the move. You retrieve a short leather strap from your belt. Hobbling means binding a horse's front legs with enough slack for shuffling, but not for bolting. It's a delicate process. Too loose and the horse runs anyway. Too tight and they trip over their own hooves and possibly yours. You crouch, breath held, and fasten the strap around your mare's legs. She snorts offended. You murmur sweet nothings. Just as you finish, the trainer yells, "New threat, flood simulation." Of course. The horn sounds again, one long blast. Riders now reposition into high ground spirals, clusters that move uphill in slow, tight rings to keep horses and gear dry while watching for danger. The spirals are beautiful. From a distance, they look like slow motion dances' hooves, leaving swirling prints in the mud. You guide your mare, hobbled but cooperative, up the incline where the ground is less soggy. Others tie their horses to living stakes, saplings, root bundles, a boulder with a carved tether hole probably left from past camps. You find a half-buried anchor stone and loop your rein through, muttering a tiny prayer that it holds. Joke 2. If the stone doesn't hold and your horse runs off, you've just invented Mongol kite flying. At the top of the hill, a lookout post with a spyglass made of leather and horn. You squint, just mountains and mist. Still, the simulation drills are real. You stay alert. You rub your mare's neck. You eye your neighbor's pony, which is trying to chew its own saddle strap. Back at camp, the elevation map system is unpacked a set of painted hides showing known terrain zones and emergency camp spots. Each clan kept their own version, sometimes with tiny horsehair braids sewn into the leather as symbols for routes, rivers, or resting grounds. You study it. A red braid marks your current location. 2 yellow ones cross at the next ridge, meaning a known pasture with clean water and anchoring rocks. That's your next destination. When the horn sounds again, you're moving. Your mare isn't hobbled this time. She seems relieved. You ride in formation 3 across, forming a wedge column, where the fastest riders guard the rear and flanks, and the green-braided ones, apprentices like you, ride center. The terrain changes, gravel slopes, low brush, sun-bleached bones scattered in the sand. Maybe a goat, maybe not. Eventually, the pasture comes into view. Horses perk up. You do too. You begin the flash park ritual, a rapid deployment of pegs loops, and spacing done under 2 minutes. You work fast. Your mare practically parks herself. She's learning faster than you, apparently. Once secured, you rest on a rock, hands blistered, back sore, but you're smiling. Joke 3. This morning you couldn't tie a rein without dropping it. Now you're basically a valet ninja. You stay there watching the sun paint stripes across the valley as horses breathe steam into the cooling air and riders stretch in silence. No commands, no horns. Just the long, slow exhale of people who've run drills 1,000 times. And now you've run them once. You're lying in tall grass trying to convince your shoulder muscles to rejoin polite society. when your trainer strolls by and taps your forehead with the butt of a riding crop. "Rise and shine, saddle sage," she says. "Today we talk grazing geometry." You sit up groaning. What happened to naps being sacred? She grins. Only for horses. Mainstream historical fact, Mongols didn't just let their horses graze anywhere. During long stops, especially in contested lands or near water sources, grazing zones were mapped with mathematical precision. Why? Because the wrong placement meant exhausted horses, angry riders, and chewed down fields that could spark interclan disputes or famine. Today's lesson, you'll learn how to park for food, as in where to tether your horse so she can eat well, rest safely, and not trample someone's sacred onion patch in the process. The first step, understanding the rotational graze loop. Your trainer draws it in the dirt, 3 interlocking crescent shapes like petals, each representing a timed grazing interval. Horses rotate from one to the next every few hours, with careful rest in between. Why not just leave them free to munch? Because Mongol horses are like toddlers at a buffet. They will eat until the field is bald, and then fight the fence post for dessert. You walk your mare to the outer ring where the grass is thick and sweet-smelling. She lowers her head and starts chewing with methodical purpose. You take a deep breath, the smell of sun-warmed grass dung and horse sweat forming an oddly comforting soup. You sit nearby with a wooden peg, your job being to monitor the graze radius, a fancy way of saying, "Don't let your horse wander more than 10 steps from this spot." You mark her position every 15 minutes with a small stone. After an hour, the pattern is obvious. She's slowly spiraling. Smart girl. Quirky tidbit. Some Mongol riders braided tiny bells into their horses' manes, not for decoration, but to measure grazing distance. If the bell got too faint or too loud, you knew your horse had wandered off track. Joke 1. Your mare has no bell. Just an internal compass and the stubborn grace of a lawnmower with opinions. After the morning graze, it's water time. You join a caravan heading toward a stream, each horse tied in pairs for safety. The lead horses wear blue fringe, signaling they're reliable drinkers and not prone to spooking at fish. Yes, that's a real thing. Fish-triggered panic is not as rare as you'd think. You reach the stream, its banks carved by decades of hooves. Here comes the second layer of parking etiquette: slope sips. Slope sips means angling your horse toward the stream without standing directly at the water's edge to prevent slippage, stampede, or awkward drownings. You tether your mare to a root behind her, not in front, so she can drink freely. But you can pull her back if a leaping carp makes her rethink her life choices. You squat in the reeds, sipping cold water from your palm. Your boots half submerged, your thoughts drifting. It's quiet here. Just the soft slurp of horses drinking and the occasional burble of the stream disagreeing with a rock. Historians still argue whether grazing zones were rotated purely for ecological reasons, or if they carried spiritual meaning. Some fields were considered first graze blessed, others taboo. What's clear is that zones were memorized, mapped, and sometimes even sung pastorally from generation to generation. Your trainer returns with a carved stick. It looks like a flute, but it's actually a graze marker notched with distance codes and seasonal songs. "We're heading into yellow loop pasture," she says, tapping the third notch. "Short grass, sour roots, but clean water." You nod. Your mare flicks her tail and burps. Back in camp, you're assigned to help with the evening graze watch, which means you'll sit on a hill with a spyglass made from horn and leather and monitor the entire herd like some kind of equine shepherd. The horses graze in rough circles divided by color and clan red ribbons to the north, blue to the east, green in the flats. You learn another rule: no grazing near tent lines after sundown. It attracts biting flies, scatters dung near sleeping areas, and makes night guards grumpy. You shift position. Your mare is still grazing calmly in the lower crescent, occasionally raising her head to blink at the clouds. Joke 2. You consider how you're spending your life counting horse bites per minute from a hill, and somehow it feels noble. Evening falls. The sky turns that saturated blue that looks painted with a gold strip along the horizon. One by one, riders begin calling their horses and using clicks, whistles, or a single shouted word. No need for halters, just habit, trust, and sheer routine. Your mare returns on her own. You offer her a treat, a lump of dried apple. She eats it and immediately starts nudging your pocket for more. You tether her for the night, using the double loop method, tying the reins in a figure 8, around a peg and a second line that's connected to your own ankle. If she tries to wander, she'll wake you and possibly drag you through the fire pit. That's incentive. Joke 3. You tell her if she tries it, you'll park her next to the snoring yak tomorrow. The stars are out, horses are bedded, and the field falls quiet. Somewhere a rider plays a reed flute, the melody rising and falling like a lullaby. You lie beside your mare, your body curved against hers, the grass warm from her breath. You close your eyes and murmur the gray's loop chant under your breath. Not for magic, just for rhythm. Spiral in, spiral out, rest, rotate, eat, return, and with that you drift. The world wakes up differently on migration day. You feel it before you hear it, hooves shifting in the damp grass fabric, rustling like sails catching wind. The quiet murmur of anticipation layered under a symphony of yawns, snorts, and the clink of iron bits. Your mare senses it too. She's already pawing the dirt, her body taut with the promise of movement. Today you learn how to park on the march, which, yes, sounds contradictory, but that's the Mongol way. Horses weren't just parked at rest. They had to be temporarily parked in motion, calm, responsive, never tangled, and always ready to halt, graze, or sprint at a moment's notice. Mainstream historical fact. The Mongols traveled in segmented formations with mobility lanes separating horses by role and responsiveness. Messenger horses on the outer lanes, supply mounts in the center, war horses often smaller and tougher rode with the vanguard, and all of them without exception were expected to obey specific mobile park commands for stops, slowdowns, grazing breaks, and sudden veers. So there you are, trotting in formation, the morning mist curling around your boots, when your trainer gallops up with a sharp whistle. Time to learn the soft tether ride apprentice, she calls. You blink confused. She tosses you a coiled leather cord no thicker than your thumb. You'll loop that to your saddle horn and lead another horse behind you. We call that dorsal parking. You glance back. A squat, rust-colored gelding is being led toward you. He looks at you like he's already judged your competence and found it wanting. You loop the tether and begin the dance of riding one horse, while towing another, a thing easier said than done. Your mare picks up on your nerves and starts veering left. The gelding lags, then surges. You wobble. Joke 1. You're suddenly a one-person parade, and the floats are judging you. Eventually you sink. The line tightens just enough, and the gelding trots politely behind head, bobbing like a critical ant. The trainer nods. Now try the rolling release. You blink again. It's exactly what it sounds like. While moving, you must dismount, repark, and remount all without stopping the column. You swing down, jog a few paces with your mare whispered to her to stay, and stab a peg into the soft earth of the moving root's shoulder. You jog back, remount, and carry on. Quirky tidbit. Some elite Mongol scouts trained horses to follow without reins, responding only to finger snaps or thigh pressure, called ghost tailing. In camp legends, one rider even trained his horse to fake a limp so enemies wouldn't steal it. You are not there yet, but you try ghost tailing anyway. The gelding responds by nipping your saddle flap. As the sun rises higher, the caravan crests a ridge, and suddenly the land falls away in golden waves, rolling plains dotted with tufts of scrub and old fire rings. This is open graze march country, where long migrations pause for midday meals, and the real parking artistry begins. Here Mongols use sun shadow tethers, a technique that uses the angle of the sun to measure time spent grazing. You hammer in a peg and place a stick upright in the dirt beside it, watching its shadow creep across a ring of stones. When the shadow reaches the second ring, it's time to remount. You doze in the shade of your mare, using your saddlebag as a pillow. Joke 2. You wonder if horses nap better because they never have to answer scrolls from supervisors. When the shadow moves, you're up again. This time you practice staggered stringing, where several horses are parked in daisy chain loops, tethered nose to tail but loose enough for grazing. You're assigned to manage a set of 4, a brown, a gray, a black, with white socks and a pale gold stallion, who keeps testing the limits of his rope like he's auditioning for a circus act. You learn to space them with uneven pegs, allowing for movement but discouraging tangling. You shift positions, untangle legs, move the gold stallion's nose off the gray's tail for the 3rd time. Historians still argue whether Mongols developed these systems through trial and error, or passed them down via a more formal system of training. Carvings on stirrup plates show patterns not unlike tethering diagrams. Some believe they were early instructional charts, proto-manuals for mounted behavior. Whatever the truth, the results speak for themselves. The afternoon stretch is hotter, the wind rising with every hour. You ride with your hood pulled low, the sweat sticking your shirt to your back. Your mare keeps pace like a metronome. The gelding behind her, less so. You try to drink from a canteen while holding both reins and tether. The gelding uses this moment to step on your foot. You yelp, he snorts, the trainer laughs from her mount nearby. Not bad, she says. Try triad parking next time. 1 in front, 2 behind. You look at her horrified. Later, at a ridge stop, you tried anyway. 3 horses loosely looped with you in the middle. You're a little horse sandwich, and honestly, it works. Until the black one starts nibbling your sleeve. You park them near a spring using curved rocks to mark your loops, and spend a quiet hour cleaning hooves. It's peaceful here. Birds call from a nearby stand of trees. Your mare twitches her ears, but stays calm. Joke 3. You start humming a parking lullaby, something like row, row, row. Your horse gently through the dust. Eventually, the call comes to ride again. The horses are restless, ready. You mount check the tether lines and fall into place. The caravan moves like a great river winding through the plains toward a smudge of smoke in the distance to night's camp. You ride tall dust on your boots, wine in your teeth, 3 horses in tow, and a slightly smug sense that you might finally be getting the hang of this. And you think to yourself, who knew parking could feel like flying? The camp is still shaking the road, dust from its bones when the call rings out, storm line build. You rub your eyes, still half dreaming about tether pegs and grazing bells. The sky's a soft bruised gray, low moody clouds, curling like smoke across the eastern horizon. Your mare tied loosely outside your tent lifts her head and snorts ears, flicking toward the distant rumble. Today's lesson, how to park during a storm. Or as your trainer says, how not to wake up floating face down in your saddle. Mainstream historical fact, Mongol encampments followed specific defensive layouts when storms approached, especially in open terrain. The horses more valuable than half the riders were parked with careful strategy to minimize risk from lightning flying debris or spook stampedes. The trick storm line symmetry. Horses are tethered in curved arcs, noses to wind, forming what looks like a shallow horseshoe. This shape diffuses energy, helps contain panic, and bonus makes it harder for any one horse to bolt and cause a domino of flying hooves. You and 3 other apprentices are tasked with a half circle of mares. You drive in the pegs, fast double loop each rein, and weave a wool rope through the lead rings. A safety braid meant to provide a collective calm effect. If one mare tries to run, the others anchor her, unless they all panic at once, which is why you're not allowed to blink. The wind picks up. Your mare tenses, shifting her weight. You whisper her name and scratch her ear. Joke 1. You wonder if whispering sweet nothings to your horse is better than therapy. Spoiler, it is. She doesn't interrupt. Rain hits like a drum roll. You pull your hood tighter, press your back to the nearest barrel, and watch the sky unspool itself. Thunder grumbles. Somewhere, a tether line snaps, followed by shouting. Quirky tidbit. Some Mongol herders tied small strips of fermented mare's milk leather into their tether knots during storms, believing the scent calmed nervous horses. Modern science is skeptical. You're considering it. Your trainer stomps past soaked hair plastered to her face. Keep the bell horses centered, she yells. They'll soothe the herd. Yes, the bell horses again, those carefully trained calm mares whose job is literally to radiate chill vibes. You glance at your bell mare, who's chewing cud in the storm like she's at a spa. Goddess. The worst of the storm crests within an hour. Lightning flashes, but far off. You keep your body low eyes on your rope braid, counting breaths. When the rain lets up, you check the lines, no tangles, no snap pegs, no hoof marks in your rib cage. Success. You release the horses one by one, walking each to drier ground. The field has become mud soup, so you lead them to elevated parking spots, tiny hills marked with red banners. These are known as step-up rests chosen in advance for post-storm recovery. Historians still argue whether these red flags were assigned based on rank, or if they were part of a rotating schedule. What's clear is that everyone knew what red meant: dry ground, shared calm, and no grazing until all horses were accounted for. Your mare slurps water from a puddle, sighs, and starts digging for grass with her lips. You shake your head. As the storm clears, the camp shifts again. Tents are checked, fires rekindled, and meals reheated. You're called to join hoofing duty, a team assigned to inspect every horse's parking spot for damage. You trudge from peg to peg, noting cracked stakes, muddied reins, and 3 impressive bite marks from a territorial stallion named Clove. One mare has twisted her tether so badly it looks like macrame. You spend half an hour unraveling it, whispering apologies. Joke 2. Somewhere in the cosmos, there's a god of knots laughing at you. Later you attend a class under the storm-splintered canopy, your trainer drawing in the mud. Again this time, a storm tether sigil. It's a spiral with spokes, each spoke a horse, each curve a wind buffer. You memorize it, finger tracing the pattern in your lap. She says Mongols believe that storm placement determined not just safety, but luck. Horses that weathered storms together became spiritually linked, forming what she calls a hoof bond. You've seen this before: 2 geldings nuzzling after a shared disaster, or a mare refusing to graze unless her tethermate is beside her. That evening, you're assigned to night watch. The clouds have broken the stars peeking through, but you're told to keep the horses tethered in short loops just in case the wind returns. You walk the storm line slowly, lantern swinging. The horses doze in pairs, some standing nose to flank, some lying flat in the grass. Your mare is curled like a cat head, tucked belly rising with the deep, slow breaths. You sit beside her, your back to her ribs, letting her warmth seep through your cloak. You hum softly, not a song, just something in rhythm with the wind. A few tents away, a young rider wakes up screaming. A nightmare, probably. Someone murmurs comfort. You close your eyes again, and suddenly you understand parking isn't just about logistics. It's about trust. The trust that comes when a creature big enough to crush you curls beside you in the dark, tethered only by routine and breath. Joke 3. You whisper to your mare that if she bolts tonight, she better carry you with her. She snorts shithies and drapes her tail across your legs like a blanket. You drift off smiling. The chill arrives before the sun. It starts in your toes, damp from dew and yesterday's storm, and creeps into your spine like a polite but insistent ghost. You sit up slowly, wrapped in your cloak, and blink at the faint horizon glow. Your mare is still beside you, breathing slow, her tether slack but intact. Today's lesson: parking through winter. Because if you thought storms were complicated, wait until your eyebrows freeze mid-blink. Mainstream historical fact: Mongol horses grazed outdoors through most winters, even during snowstorms. Unlike other armies that stabled their animals, the Mongols bred tough, short-legged steeds, adapted to dig through snow to reach dry grass. But surviving winter wasn't just genetics, it was strategy. You rise teeth, chattering, and start the morning by checking frost loop tension, a tethering habit unique to cold months. Ropes contract in low temperatures, often tightening around the stake, or even snapping. Mongols soaked their cords in fermented sheep fat, which kept the fibers supple, and added a strange sour musk that your mare seems to enjoy way too much. Your fingers stick to the first metal ring you touch. Lesson learned. You're assigned to the Ice Brush crew, a team whose sole purpose is to knock hoarfrost from the horses' manes and reins each morning using bristled combs made of polished antler. The frost makes a sound like tissue paper tearing, and the horses twitch at every stroke. Joke 1. You wonder if there's a spa menu for this. Exfoliate your flanks, unclog those fetlocks. The horses are parked in windshield formations, clustered tight backs to the prevailing gusts, and flanked by yurt walls, movable hides strung across poles to create warmth pockets. You press your palm to one and feel the heat radiate back. It's subtle, but real. Nearby, a shaggy foal peeks out from beneath his mother, staring at you like you owe him oats. You give him a wink. Then you're off to snowshoe drills, yes for horses. Quirky tidbit. Certain Mongol scouts crafted temporary hoof paddles for deep snow, strapping flat wood boards to their horses' fetlocks using reindeer leather. It looked absurd. It worked. You help assemble one, the foal's mother watching you like a suspicious aunt. You try to fasten one to your gelding's front hoof. He kicks. You try again. He farts. Eventually it fits, and he shuffles like a drunken goose through the snow, wide-eyed but compliant. Your trainer calls you over. Today she says you'll learn Ember, parking a cold weather ritual where tether pegs are placed around buried coal pits, gently warming the air without catching fire. It's equal parts science and superstition, a way to keep frostbite at bay. Historians still argue whether ember rings were common practice or reserved for elite herds. Some claim only the Khan's personal steeds were parked over warm soil, but others point to oral records describing fire ash buried beneath communal grazing spots. Either way, you dig a hole, place your ember pot, and mound dirt over it. When your mare steps into the ring and snorts in approval, you feel like a sorcerer. Later, you assist with ice grazing prep, marking out snow-covered zones where horses will dig for grass. Mongols taught their horses to use their hooves like shovels, often spreading ash or salt to encourage the behavior. You scatter some ash now, watching the horses paw curiously. A horn blows time for night freeze tethers. Unlike standard loops, these are designed to hold even if the ground hardens like stone. You drive in Y-shaped pegs wedge stones around their base and test each one with your full weight. Joke 2. You fall face first into a snowbank during test number 4. Your mare looks unimpressed. Again. By dusk, the wind has returned sharp and insistent. You gather the herd into cluster parking pods, 3 horses tied side by side with shared hay piles between them. This minimizes movement, maximizes warmth, and reduces the odds of midnight frolics. You hunker down in a fur-lined yurt with 3 other apprentices. Someone passes you a bowl of hot mare's milk and dumplings filled with boiled turnips. You eat silently, promising your taste buds something better next season. Outside, the night is white and endless. You take your final walk along the tether lines, lantern swinging, low boots crunching in rhythm. The horse's breath plumes like fog. You stop beside your mare, brush the frost from her eyelashes, and whisper nonsense comfort words. Old lullabies, your favorite stew recipe. She doesn't understand, but she leans closer. Joke 3. You realize you've told your horse more secrets than your best friend. As you return to the tent, snow begins to fall again, light, dry, barely there. It dusts the camp like flour on a baker's board. Tomorrow will be colder, maybe harsher, but tonight the horses are parked tight, the embers are warm, and your fingers still remember the rhythm of the rope. You sleep with your boots near the fire, your dreams full of frost hoofbeats, and the warm scent of fermented rope oil. The thaw creeps in not with fanfare, but with mud. You wake to the sound of dripping, a steady rhythmic pitter, as icicles melt from tent flaps and puddles soak through last night's snow crust. Your mare's coat, once fluffed for warmth, now lies damp and ragged. Spring has arrived, not with flowers or birdsong, but with slush and tangled tethers. Today is challenge parking during the seasonal transition, a deceptively messy test of patience, agility, and balance. Mainstream historical fact. Spring migrations were the most complex periods for Mongol camps. Tethering practices had to adapt daily to ground conditions, melting snow, slippery terrain, and the horse's wild resurgence of energy after long winter stillness. You step outside into a battlefield of hooves and hoof prints. Horses buck and roll in the slush, legs caked in filth. Your boots sink ankle deep. You almost lose one in the first 5 minutes. Joke 1. You're starting to think Mongol spring is just a fancy way of saying equestrian slapstick. Today's formation is called the slide array tethers, placed at angled diagonals spaced further apart, giving horses room to skid without tangling. Pegs are double driven, one long, one short, for stability and soft ground. Your hammer arm aches before breakfast. Nearby, a novice forgets to widen his loops. His gelding takes one-step lips and ends up splayed like a dropped meat pie. He's fine, just muddy. The novice is less fine. His trainer mutters about spring fools under her breath. As the sun rises higher, things go from sloshy to swampy. You're ordered to join mudcore duty, where you and 2 others reinforce tethers with flat woven grass mats, primitive traction aids that keep the reins from sinking into muck. They smell like mildew and desperation. Your mare refuses to walk across hers. She snorts, sidesteps, and glares like you've asked her to step on a snake. You bribe her with a leftover dumpling. She accepts resentfully. Quirky, tidbit Mongol herders sometimes braided strips of dried onion skin into their horses' manes in spring, believing it kept gnats away. You try it. Your mare smells like soup. After the morning chaos, you're called to help with hoof checking. Spring is when cracks appear, frogs get infected, and everything needs trimming. You learn to scrape mud with the side of your dagger and file rough edges using sandstone blocks. Historians still argue whether seasonal tether rituals had a spiritual layer, if spring mud represented rebirth chaos, or simply inconvenience. Some claim certain peg placements echoed sky patterns intended to appease Tengri, the eternal blue sky god. Whether that's true or not, you're ordered to realign your stakes with the stars using a wooden compass and a lot of guesswork. You hammer squint and hope Tengri likes crooked. After lunch, a soup you suspect once contained leather, you learn rotational looping, a system where horses are reparked every few hours to prevent trenching the ground. It's backbreaking. You drag pegs, coil, muddy rope, and wipe your hands on grass that's wetter than your boots. Joke 2. At this point, you've named the mud. You call it Greg. Greg is clingy. One horse slips during a loop shift and pulls another with him. Chaos erupts. Shouting, slipping. One apprentice goes down face first in manure. You catch a spooked filly just in time, her heart pounding like a drum beneath your hands. Then like a switch flip, the sun comes out. The whole field sparkles, wet leather, shining reins, horses steaming gently like living geysers. Your mare lowers her head to nuzzle a patch of newly uncovered grass, and you take a moment to breathe. The wind smells different now, not sharp, just clean. Your trainer waves you over for grooming duty, not for show, but to prep horses for shed season. Hair comes out in clumps caught in your fingers like wool. Some riders braid the shedding into rain charms and hang them from tent poles. You think about trying it. You don't. That evening, you help reconfigure the parking grid for the night, wider spacing, higher ground, and short anchor loops to prevent night rolling. You secure the ropes with half bows, stomp the pegs into mud that sucks at your boots. The camp is quieter than usual. The horses are tired. You're tired. You sit by the tether line watching your mare flick her tail in lazy rhythm. She's grazing not frantically, but with the unhurried contentment of a creature who survived another winter. Joke 3. You wonder if horses dream of spring, or if they just dream of not being tied to you. You stretch out in the wet grass anyway, ignoring the cold creeping into your bones. The sky fades from gold to gray to deep smoky blue. Tomorrow will be warmer, probably wetter, and very, very muddy. But tonight the tether lines are taut. The horses are calm, and even Greg the Mud seems willing to let you sleep without claiming another sock. The last lesson arrives with no announcement, no horn blast, no shouted command. It just unfolds. You wake with sunlight on your face, a warm breeze stirring the tent flap, and the low, familiar rustle of grazing horses. No trainer barking orders, no lists or drills, just the quiet hum of a camp that's gotten so good at what it does, it no longer needs to say it out loud. You step outside, and for the first time it feels like your camp. Not borrowed, not temporary, yours. The horses are parked perfectly in a soft fan formation, pegs aligned by instinct loops, adjusted without fuss. Your mare flicks her tail and gives you a look that says, about time. Mainstream historical fact. By their mid-teens, many Mongol horsemen had internalized the parking code so completely, they could tether, untether, and restake a herd of 20 in under an hour solo. It wasn't just skill, it was a language. Today, there's no formal task. You drift from group to group, helping a novice with a slippery knot, handing a water flask to someone sweating over a loose peg, brushing stray hairs from your mare's shoulder, because, well, just because. You notice things now, tiny things. The twist in the rope that means the ground's soft beneath. The way your mare shifts her weight before the weather turns. The slight musical ping of tension in a loop that signals a knot slipping, barely audible, but unmistakable to your now honed ears. Quirky tidbit. In some Mongol clans, apprentices weren't considered fully trained until they could identify 3 horses by hoof sound alone. You try it tapping your staff on the ground. Your mare snorts. You get one right. 2-ish. The camp starts packing at midday. The spring migration is here. Yurts or folded fires doused everything lashed onto carts or slung over saddle frames. You help load gear coil ropes and whistle to your mare as she noses your sleeve, probably looking for snacks. Historians still argue whether this kind of hypermobile synchronized packing system emerged purely from necessity, or if it reflected a deeper cultural rhythm, an understanding that the earth is never still, so life shouldn't be either. By late afternoon, you're mounted. The camp is gone except for a few smoothed over peg holes and some trampled grass. The herd moves in waves, riders ahead, wagons creaking behind, and horses shifting like water in motion. You glance down at your mare's flank. Her tether loop, coiled tight on her side bag, swings gently. It's not just a rope anymore. It's a memory, a tool, a signature, a story. You guide her toward the open, plain eyes, forward reins loose. You're not thinking about parking anymore. You're thinking about rhythm, about movement, about knowing where to pause and where to push forward. Joke 1. You smile, remembering your first day when you accidentally tethered your mare to a dung cart and she dragged it halfway across camp. Progress. Evening falls. The new camp rises from nothing. Pegs go in. Loops get checked. Tethers stretched like taut lines between stars. And there you are in the middle of it all, tying your mare with a single practice flick. You hum a tune you heard once, something your trainer used to mutter when the ropes got stubborn, and your mare rests her weight into the loop as if the tune's all the signal she needs. There's no applause, no celebration, just the quiet peace of knowing you're part of something bigger now. You settle by the fire with your tools, not to work, but to listen to the flames, to the horses, to the wind, whispering across the steppe like it's carrying someone else's dreams home for the night. Joke 2. You wonder if there's a cosmic leaderboard for least dramatic yet most important skills, and if Mongol horse parking is winning by a landslide. As you lie back staring up at the stars, those same stars that mirrored your pegs once upon a frozen night, you feel your body relax. Not with exhaustion, but with rhythm. The same rhythm the horses breathe. The same rhythm the ropes hold. You close your eyes. The tether lines stretch around you like a lullaby. You sleep not as a student, but as a keeper of knots, of patterns of stories. A sleeper tethered not by rope, but by memory. And now, as your thoughts drift like dust across the steppe, let the final image settle. A horizon painted in pale gold. A tether line humming gently in the wind. Horses breathing slow, deliberate, dream-filled breaths as the camp quiets beneath a sky so wide, it feels like time itself might dissolve into it. There's no urgency now. No lesson to memorize. No loop to retie. Only the low, calming sway of a life lived in step with something older than maps. You lie back in the gentle grass, every muscle softened, every sound just distant enough to lull. The fire crackles low, its embers blinking slowly, sleepily, like the last flickers of a lantern watching over you. Your mare shifts once her tether line tightening, just so reassuring rhythmic known. And in that simple gesture, in that remembered pull of leather and trust, you find the quiet joy of things done well, of stories lived simply, of meaning woven into motion. Let your breath slow, let the night deepen. Let the soft sounds of hooves and wind wrap around you like wool. No need to move. No need to plan. You've made it here where the lines hold and the ground is firm. Sleep well, keeper of ropes. Dream of hoofbeats that never stumble. And rest, because tomorrow the camp rides again.